Hey guys, I want to show you how we can protect our back and our neck a little bit better when we are doing things like exercising or lifting something or moving something, because there's a lot of misconceptions about spinal health and how to best optimize our own body mechanics. So we all have natural curves in our spine, right? So if I stand to the side, there's a little bit of a curve in my low back. It rounds out a little bit around my rib cage, and then our neck curves up to keep our head level with the horizon. That is a good neutral spine. That is how we want to load the spine in most cases. Now, the problem is that a lot of people say, yeah, I know, I need to squat and lift with my legs. And then what they do is they squat and then they bend forward at their belly button. This reverses that lumbar curve and it puts a lot more strain on our low back. So if we are bending at the belly button, now these muscles back here are trying to pull us back up to keep us upright and help us to lift. This works fine when we aren't lifting anything heavy or without a lot of repetition, and those muscles are meant to be used and help with lifting, but we can make it easier on ourselves if we keep a really good hip hinge. Now, a hip hinge is when we think about pushing the creases of our hips back. That allows our glutes to lengthen so that when we come back up to that standing position, our glutes are doing a lot of the work. These are really big muscles, so we want them to do a lot of the work. It also helps to take strain off of your knees and your ankles, because the alternative, when people aren't dumping at their belly button, is they keep a really good upright posture and then they just squat down like an Oompa Loompa. That doesn't allow us to use our glutes as well. And now we're using our knees and our ankles a little bit more. Again, every now and then, picking a toy off the floor, something to that effect is fine. But if you're doing it all of the time, at some point, you're going to start to feel those effects down the road. So what I want to work on is working on that really good hip hinge, which feels kind of robotic at first. So it starts to become more ingrained in your brain and your body, and then it feels more natural over time. Then we are protecting our spine a little bit more when we are doing those heavier lifting or repetitive tasks. So I have a handy dandy broomstick here. If you just have a random wooden rod hanging around, or just something that has some straightness and length to it and no weight, that works great. So if I'm trying to keep that neutral spine, I hold this up against my back. So it is touching at my sacrum, in between my butt cheeks, and in between my shoulder blades, and then at the crown of my head. There's a little bit of space at my neck with that curvature, and there's a little bit of space at my low back with that curvature. So to keep that hip hinge, think about keeping that dowel or that broomstick against your spine and stick your butt back. And then come back up to standing. This feels like you are sticking your butt out into the wide universe, but I promise you, it starts to feel more natural over time, and it does not look that goofy as you're doing it. Maybe it looks goofy for me doing it now, holding a broomstick against my spine, but in real life, if I'm picking up a heavy piece of luggage, it looks absolutely normal, so don't stress about it. So you're going to stand with your broomstick against your spine, hinge at the hips, maybe a little bit of a small knee bend. Come back up to standing and think about pushing the ground away from you as if you're going to go into a jump, but don't go into a jump. That helps to fire into the glutes, especially for those of us that might have some dumb butts out there. So hinge at the hips, let your butt muscles lengthen, small little squat, push the ground away from you, come back to standing. All of those points on your broomstick should still be touching at your sacrum, in between your shoulder blades, and at your head. If you're starting to lose some of those contact points, maybe you're letting your head drift down too much, maybe you're rounding out that low back, or maybe you're keeping it really well anchored at your head and at your shoulder blades, but then you're letting it fall off of your spine. Now, if we have a seat available, Mine is a little bit lower than usual. A couch or my higher chair should work fine. You're thinking about keeping that good posture, hinge at the hips, and you're going to slowly lower down as if you're about to sit in that chair until your butt barely touches, and then come back up. This is starting to load us into that really good squat position. So you hinge at the hips, bend the knees, slowly lower down. This is what helps us to get our knees bending, but not bending past our toes. There are a lot of arguments saying that we should never let our knees go past our toes. I don't necessarily agree with that, and there's definitely an argument to say our knees can go past our toes when we go into a squat. My argument is if we are loading the squat with something heavy, like a big piece of luggage or furniture, it's better to hinge back a little bit more so that you have a better base of support, better balance, and then you're able to lift a little bit better. Okay, so I'm not going to get into that huge kerfuffle about the knees over toes because it can go both ways. There's no one rule set in stone. Our bodies are different, scenarios are different. So again, stand with your broomstick up nice and tall, hinge at the hips, slowly lower down with your knees until you barely touch your seat. Come back up. Hinge, 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 slowly lower down, come back up. For those of you with pelvic issues, any sort of pelvic organ prolapse where you have that heaviness or that dragging in your pelvic region, or for those of you who maybe leak when you try to get out of your recliner or your couch, we can play around with our breath a little bit here as well to help engage our core muscles a little bit better to prevent those symptoms. So with that case, you're thinking about hinging and lowering with a nice big inhale. And as you stand up and push the ground away from you, you are exhaling gently, like you're trying to blow out the flame of a candle without blasting the wax everywhere. So inhale down, exhale up. Inhale down, exhale, maybe a gentle pelvic floor contraction on your way up if you need a little extra support. There are ways to modify our squats and our hip hinges depending on what we are doing. So for instance, if you need to get something down low and really anchor it from below, you make your feet wider. Then you're hinging, you're squatting, and then you're coming all of the way up. If, let's say, you're reaching for a child in a crib, you've got that higher bar support. You can't squat down to pick that child up. Maybe you hip hinge a little bit, pull the child closer to you, and then you can stand up from there. I know this is not a one size fits all. Cribs look different, kids are squirmy. It's not an ideal setup. But as best you can, try to think about getting that hip hinge involved, keeping a good neutral spine so that you can protect yourself. Because if you have a kid, you're probably picking them up a lot. Or if you're moving around a lot or you have a very laborious job, you want to protect yourself with that repetition. So give this a try, give it some practice. It will feel silly, but that's okay. One day, your body mechanics may be so fantastic that you're going through the TSA line at the airport and a TSA agent will tell you how fantastic your body mechanics look when you picked up a piece of luggage. True story. Give that a go. Let me know if there's any concerns and keep practicing. Stay strong and bendy.